Hey, I'm talking today with Tikiri. How you doing, Tikiri?
I'm doing excellent, Jim. Thanks for having me.
You actually do have a last name, but sort of like Beyonce or Cher on your book covers, you just use Tikiri.
Absolutely. It's the way to go.
Well, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna read a little bit of your Amazon bio now, so we can find out more about this mysterious one-named woman on the podcast today. Tikiri Herath is the multiple award winning author of the Red Heeled Rebels international thriller novels and the Rebel Diva Empowerment series. She is also the founder of the Rebel Diva Academy, an education and media company designed to inspire and uplift women around the world. When she's not writing or plotting another fictional crime scene, she's in her kitchen cooking up fusion cuisine with a glass of red wine in hand and sweet jazz playing in the background. She's an adrenaline junkie who has rock climbed, bungee jumped, rode on the back of a motorcycle across Quebec, flown in an acrobatic airplane upside down, and parachuted solo. So, wow, that's amazing. That's quite a resume there.
You've got to live life. I would say life's too short not to.
Yeah. So, Kiri, tell us a little bit about you and your writing.
I am a product of many places. I was born in Asia. I grew up in Africa. I've lived and worked in Southeast Asia and Europe, and I've lived in Quebec for a very long time with my then husband, and now I'm in Vancouver, Canada. So when people say, "Where are you from?" I honestly don't know,
Mm.
but I'm from everywhere. And I just share that because it is those experiences that really triggered me to write the books that I write. And so it's seeing all these different cultures and traditions. It stimulates your brain, right? And you have to find a way to get it all out. But also, there were a lot of things that I saw the good, the bad, and ugly on my travels. So I wanted to encapsulate some of that ugly, and I want to showcase it and find ways on how we can beat it. And in my case, I was talking about because I grew up as a young girl, as a young woman in different cultures, I saw how they treated women. And then I come to North America where I walk into a boardroom with my pearls on and heels and I get respected. Until recently, for 15 years, I worked for the Canadian federal government. And it's not the same case for women around the world. It's a very different story. And the fact that I'm so privileged, I thought I have to write these stories about women. And I give them sass, I give them spunk, and I give them submachine guns. And I let them loose around the world in places I've lived in. And I'm just having a whole ball of fun.
Right, there's no better ammunition for a writer gun than life experience, right?
That's so true. Yes, that is so true.
So, Takiri, here is your first question, and it's probably the most important question. What is the grossest food you've ever had to eat?
I do have an answer for that. I was in South Korea at one point, and we got lost. A girlfriend of mine, she was from Taiwan, and we decided we'll just go off to South Korea. We got on a bus in Seoul, and we did one of those. Here's where we want to go on a map, kind of the tourist place. And we got on the bus that took us there, not knowing anything. Neither of us spoke the language. At least she looked Koreanish, so she got a pass. I didn't. It was an interesting ride, and we got to this little shop in little town where everything was closed except for one tiny hole in the wall restaurant. And I think I knew what I had for stew there, and you can imagine what it might be. We heard dogs barking outside, and they were tied up. So I didn't realize that until I left. And again, we didn't read anything. Nobody spoke English. We just had the menu, and we did the let's have that. Well, looking back, I don't think I'd ever do that again. I'm vegan now. But that was, when I think of it, I go, wow, it's probably not something I would ever want to do again. Ever,
Yeah,
ever.
nasty. Okay. So the today we're talking about your favorite thriller, and the favorite thriller you said that you wanted to talk about was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. Can you give us, for the five people out there who haven't yet read that book, can you give us like a spoiler-free synopsis or just a quick summary of what it's about?
Absolutely. So there is a spunky, sassy woman in there, just like is there in my novels, and she teams up, or I should say, there is a journalist who teams up with a hacker of sorts, and the two of them go on an adventure in Sweden and they work for one of the most wealthiest men in the country to solve a mystery, which they originally think it's a murder. And so the story goes. I don't want to give too much away, but it is suspense, it is thrilling, but it also talks to a whole bunch of themes that really resonated with me. And I think that, well, there are movies made about it, so it's a really amazing book.
So from what I remember from the book, and I read that and I saw the movie, I know that Lisbeth Salander is the female protagonist, and then there's Michael Blomkvist.
Yes.
I don't know how you'd say his last name. And they kind of have equal billing in the book. They're sort of like co-protagonists, but because of the series, Lisbeth is the character who's in all the books. So you'd probably call her the series protagonist, right? Like she's the hero of the series. What do you think it is that makes Lisbeth Salander so compelling that people follow her across these multiple books?
I can't speak for others, but I can speak for myself. And maybe a lot of us who are just dying, Jim, we're dying for normal, typical, the regular woman in books. And I feel like I have maybe sat next to somebody who looks like and sounds like and has had a past that's Lisbeth Salander had. She's not overly sexualized. She's just a regular woman that I would have gone to high school with, right? Even though I went to high school in Africa, in international school, there were girls I remember with the tattoos and the nose earrings and with that attitude. I've been one of them. So it's that very regular, normal, real woman. For me, I can't speak for everybody else, but that's what attracted me to that book, and that's what kept me turning the pages, because I wanted to. It was so raw, it was so real, and it was something I could relate to. Not the hacker part and not running around and solving those big crimes, but it's just the way she was and how she reacted, and also the fact that she's so flawed but she's not stupid. And if there's anything that bothers me about modern day thriller novels and suspense novels, is how women are portrayed as just sniveling, dumb, slow-witted characters who can't make a decision to save themselves from a paper bag, while Lisbeth is hurt and she goes through pretty much of a hellish childhood, and she stands up and in her own way she fights back and she makes people pay. So that makes me, it's like that feeling of that redemption, that feeling of she stuck it to him, and she wasn't stupid. And I think it's the absence of the too stupid to live trope, which I keep seeing in books, that as a reader, it just bothers me. I want to throw the books out the window when I read those books. And then Lisbeth Salander comes on, and she's just a kick-ass badass, who's just a normal person, who's just trying to live a life that you can just feel her, you can relate to her.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since I read that first book, but from what I remember, I think Lisbeth Salander always gives you the impression in any scene that she's the smartest person in the room.
But she doesn't. It's not like she purposefully throws people away. I mean, I didn't watch the movie, but in the book, it's just her presence gives that sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you probably can't tell us too much about the villain without spoiling things, because if I remember right, the real villain isn't immediately part of the story, right? The villain is revealed later, because it's more like a mystery than it is a thriller where you know who the bad guy is from the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
Would you describe this book as a page turner?
I found it a page turner. I read it in, I think, a day.
Wow.
I just wanted to know what happened in the end. So read it on a Sunday, I believe, and I just got it to the end. It was great.
What do you think it is about the girl with the dragon tattoo that made it so page turny for you?
That's a good question. I think, what's funny? I'm a writer, but when I read, I always tell myself I have to look at how they wrote it, but I end up getting carried away by the story. I think he's a really good writer. I think the character, and maybe it's the mystery too, what's going to happen next. There aren't too many car chases and big buildings blowing up, but it had this very strong underneath resonance, that current that took you along. That's how I felt about it.
Hmm.
And also I just loved the entire. There were many themes in that book, hey, that Stieg put in. And if you know his background, he's also an activist. So when I read about all what he did, and then when I read the book, I understood where all these themes were coming from. So that kept it really interesting. I wanted to know where he would take that theme and where would we end up in, because you can take this anywhere, 360 degrees.
What do you think those themes that he was trying to insert into the book were?
I like, because I've lived in different places. I have had dinner with the mayor of Vienna, and I've also had a meal with somebody in a slum in Sri Lanka. So he talked about, sorry, no, Stieg, the story that he wrote had that theme of just the social dynamics, the corruption among large industries. I mean, you touch on them. That's the reason why the journalist was hired in the first place to solve this mystery. I mean, the work he was doing. So you talked, I mean, in a country where I've been to, it is one of the first world countries where, at a first glance, it is one of the cleanest in every way, society, corruption, and women's rights and all that stuff. And then yet underneath it, there's still this simmering issues. I guess we're all human at the end of the day. I've also, been to India where, as a child, visited there, and the corruption is in your face. Right? It's horrific. Some of the things that some people, it's been so normalized that you talk to a normal, regular Indian, they'll go, yeah, well, those kids begging, that's just the way it is. But anyway, to go back to the book, I felt like the themes of corruption, the themes of collusion, the themes of just the different social dynamics, the rich and the poor, even in a country like Sweden, and of course, women's rights and feminism, and how this girl was treated by her guardian, so to speak, the social guardian who mistreated her in a horrific way. All of those themes I felt was what made that book it was weighty. It was fulfilling. It wasn't just popcorn. I read popcorn books, but this book made me feel like it was satiated at the end. I felt like I had a full meal that was fully satisfying, because it touched on all those themes, and it was very realistic because of that. If that makes any sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember in the I think in the second book in the series, I think that's the girl who played with fire, or the girl who kicked the hornet's nest. I get the numbers confused, but I think in the second book he started off the book with some statistics about violence against women, and so I think that's one of the things I took away from it, was that was another theme he was trying to get across, was about violence against women. So you say that if you said this is your favorite thriller, Tikiri, what's the one thing that makes this stand above all other thrillers? Why would you pick this one to say that it's your favorite? What grips you about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo more than any other book?
Character, because you have a badass character that is so realistic, and she's not the usual character that you'd expect. You see thrillers and you see the woman with the big, the cleavage and the tiny waist and running around and so over sexualized. And then you see Elizabeth Salander, who's like the girl next door. And I think for me, that's what brought that book to the height that it has. And and people think feminism is a bad word, but there are 130 million girls who are being pulled out of school in Africa, Asia, and some parts of Europe because they're being married off, before they're 18. They're being sold off or used as chattel, used as for menial labor. And I think as long as that's happening, I want the Elizabeth Salanders to kick ass over and over and over again, so that some girl, some woman will read it and go, you know what? Bad things are happening, but I ain't going to sit down and take it. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight back. And it's possible because you and I live in a world where someone like me can come in, an immigrant girl, go to university, get my degrees, get an amazing job, and do really well. So we humans can create these amazing environments where we are so lucky to live. But a huge portion of the world doesn't. So I say keep Lisbeths coming, because we need everyone to have the opportunities that you and I have.
That's awesome. I think another thing for me that made Lisbeth compelling is the air of mystery around her, and you never really know what she's thinking or what she's going to do next. Like, I remember in the second or third book, and I'll try to say this without spoiling anything, but she's accused of a heinous crime, and then there's scenes with her from her point of view, and she doesn't ever really think about, like, you don't ever even know if she's guilty of the crime when they're her scenes. She still does things throughout the book, and you don't even know if she's guilty or not because you can't figure out what she's thinking. Her mind is so closed off, and so I'm not expressing myself very well, but it's so compelling because you don't know what's going on in her head when she's doing these things, and that for me made it very intriguing.
Yes. Now, I have books 2 and 3, but I haven't read them yet because to me, reading is like traveling. I've never want to travel back to the same countries that I've traveled to. I've traveled to 40 plus countries now, and I just can't, Jim, go back to the same cities because there's such a huge world around. So it's the same thing with my books. I want to read different authors. So I can't wait to go back and read the last 2. But I love that first one.
Yeah, and there's actually, Stieg Larsson died of a heart attack maybe 5-10 years ago now. I don't know how long ago, but another author has taken over the book. So beyond the 3 he wrote, and there was rumored to be a 4th manuscript that he wrote that he never delivered. And there's been 3 or 4 others by other authors. I haven't read any of those. I don't know if they're any good or not.
I've read a lot of reviews, and they're not the most positive. I think it's hard when your favorite author passes away, and you can see when someone else takes the pen. Now, I haven't read it, so I shouldn't be speaking to it, but I think I'll stick with the first 3. And it's the saddest thing that Stieg. I think we need more good people like Stieg on this earth.
Yeah. So, Tikiri, what book of yours would you like to talk about today?
Well, I have a series. I call them the Red-Heeled Rebel series, and they are, I talked about them at the beginning, they are about a group of young women and men who have gone through all sorts of adversities around the world. They come from the slums of India, the brothels of Eastern Europe. There's where white slavery still happens and nobody talks about it, and come from the refugee camps of Africa. And I bring all these young people together and have them exact vigilante justice against the villains who kept them down, and I make it very satisfying indeed. I am having such a ball writing the series. I've got 3 done, and I'm writing 3 more. I'm just plotting the next series out. So I'm learning a little bit more about guns and weapons and trying to give them some martial arts expertise so they can go and kick some ass harder and faster.
The first book in the series is called Betrayed. What's that one about?
That one follows the life of the main protagonist. She becomes orphaned after her parents die in a car crash in East Africa, and she's sent home. Sent to a family she never knew existed in India, and she realizes she had these educated parents in Africa, and now they're gone, and she's now in a little village in India where women are treated really differently. She's pulled out of school, being sold to this man who is a rickshaw business owner and supposedly the richest man in that little village, who wants a little girl as a second wife, and she rebels, and she, of course, she gets away, and the story is her. When she gets away, she actually gets scooped up by a human trafficking ring, because those are the girls that these human traffickers prey on. But she's always fighting her way out, and so the story follows her across 3 continents. And I always make it a point to only write about places I've traveled to or lived in, so I can talk about them authentically. And so she follows kind of like my own journey, except I was lucky I went to schools instead of brothels. But so we follow her journey and how she meets all these other friends and then gets back at the people who tried to harm her.
Have you read Livy Alone by Barry Eisler?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, Betrayed sounds a little bit like that. It's not exactly the same, but I hear shades of that Livy Alone book in what you're describing how Betrayed is.
Yes, I read that book just a few months ago. And what happened to Livia Lone's sister? You know, she's this is the sister who dies, and she's the one who's missing.
Hmm.
Livia Lone is she's the main protagonist, and I think she works for the FBI or some law enforcement agency. But whatever happens to her missing sister is what I guess that has a similar journey. And I just read that a few months ago, and I'm hooked. So I've got to read the rest of his books.
Hmm.
But I like the fact that we're telling the world, here's what's going on, but make it entertaining, because you've got to take people through a story and give them satisfaction of that. But at the same time, let's not close our eyes and have a beer or have a glass of wine and turn our backs to those our brothers and sisters around the world who are hurting. Because I think the more we become aware, the harder it is for people to keep those curtains closed. And I'm a big believer in, I think it's Martin Luther King. He said that when we keep silent, sorry, it was Einstein, that we allow those bad things to happen. I'm totally paraphrasing him in a terrible way, but he said that that's exactly how. I think he was talking about the Nazi occupation and the Holocaust. But when we keep silent about things that matter, that's when we become part of the problem. So just becoming aware, if it's just reading a book, how amazing is that? We still
Hmm.
become a citizen of this world.
Absolutely. Takiri, is there anything I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about? Anything, any burning desires to get something about the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or your Red Heeled Rebels series, which is a great series name, by the way. I like that a lot. Red Heeled Rebels. That's a good
Thank
name.
you.
Anything
And
else? Go ahead.
no, but since you brought up Red Heel Rebels, have you heard of the red sneaker effect?
That name sounds familiar, but I can't.
It's a research study done by, I think, Harvard scientists or some scientist group, and they talked about how you can become a rebel. Rebel can have a negative connotation, but can you become a rebel by doing something different and raising awareness to something that's really important and being a maverick, but bringing good to the world by being the maverick? So you're not accepting things for as they are, and he's just the study name came from one of the professors who wore red sneakers to one of his classes, and the students ranked that lecture as high because he was different, he was cool, he was funky, he was a rebel, he wasn't the typical professor or what have you. And anyway, so I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, but that red sneaker effect is something that I don't know why I want to share that with you, Jim.
That's okay.
It's probably the theme in my books too. So I give my girls the red heels to say, be a maverick, be different.
Excellent. Well, Takiri, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been excellent to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure.